Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Charles here from Talk to Us. Welcome to our live streaming webinar this afternoon. We've got a great topic this afternoon that's going to be covered by Linda on dealing with negative attitudes. So just as a reminder, we will be conducting some quick polls again this afternoon. Please have your smartphones ready with the QR reader capability turned on. This will allow you to scan the QR code on the screen, and then complete the quick poll for us. We will share the results at the end of the session. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Linda. Thank you very much, Linda, and over to you.
Afternoon, everybody. Great to be back again. For our regular viewers, nice seeing you again, or nice hearing from you again. For those who haven't been with us before, just a reminder of what we're hoping to achieve with these webinars. So, you know, for the longest time, we've been doing the same things. We've been thinking and doing in the same way, and I suppose it's become a comfort zone for us, and therefore we don't change. And what we're hoping to achieve with these webinars is to have a look at a different way moving forward. Not necessarily just post-COVID, but just moving forward in general. And what I'm personally hoping is that we look more towards our people in our business. So I don't want to call them human capital, because they are not capital, they're not assets and liabilities, they're people, they have potential, they have ideas. So we're going to call them our human potential. And something that's always been very interesting to me is and I've stolen this phrase from Dion Binneman, who's a good associate. You know, we're always talking about hardware and software, but what about the living way? So thank you for that, Dion, you're quite right. What about the living way? So what we're hoping to achieve with the webinars is just for people to think and to react about how their people have brought the best into their business and how their people are upholding and carrying their business forward. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you look at it, when you take the people out of the business, you have offices with expensive equipment and often cool furniture. So that's the idea of the webinar series, and that's what we're achieving. We have guest speakers, we also have handouts at the end of it, and today we've got some exciting news as well. So I'm Linda Hammond, I'm the founder and CEO of Talk to Us. Talk to Us has been around since 2000, and we have always really offered a suite of products around how do you look towards your people to help you build your brand. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of who we are. And we're a consulting agency who does integrated communication strategies that align people to purpose. And so people often ask us, well, what is a consulting agency versus an agency? The consulting part of the agency is really where we look at giving you advice and advisory services on branding, marketing, change management, and integrated communication. And the agency is where we do the execution part of it, where we deliver on the various projects that you want. So consulting is outcome driven, and agency is output driven. And that's really the difference. A bit more about us. Our main focus is to build brand confidence in and through your people. Your brand is as confident as the people who work for it, and as confident as what they are in putting your brand forward to your customers. And that's really how you build brand confidence to take into the future. So there's four elements to this. The one side is really about who you are, what you stand for, what your purpose is, and how your purpose is going to make the world a better place. So it's quite internal focused. It's commonly known as branding. It's really, what are you going to do to enable this strategy? The next part is around how you activate this brand of yours. So commonly known as marketing. And whereas branding is who you are, marketing is what we can do for you. And the way in which you actually activate it is through creating emotional connection. If there's no emotional connection, you'll have no following, and as a result, your brand will probably not be as successful as it could be. Sitting in between these two components is a level of self-awareness, and this is the bridge between who you are and what you do for others. In other words, what you do and what you do for others. And unless you're quite aware of how this is being perceived and received by others, you run the risk of promising one thing and doing another, or promising something that people are really not interested in, and therefore it will fail. So one of the key things around this self-awareness bit is to reflect, so that you can continuously improve what you're doing, but also so that you can change and mold your model. So a reflection that we've had of late is everybody has realized, if I don't have any online presence, I'm going to be in serious trouble, because that's where it's happening. If my people can't represent my brand properly, I'm going to be in trouble, because it is no longer my marketing department who presents it, or just my salespeople who represent it. It's everybody in my business that represents it. So that's the sort of bridge between who you are and what you do and what you do for others. Sitting around that is the integrated communication, and that is how you actually communicate with everybody out there. What is your tone in your register, and how do you want people to perceive you? Do you take your messaging out on time? Is your messaging aligned to the consumption preferences of your audience? Is it aligned to the audiences that you're attracting? So if you're after a younger set, do you speak their language, or do you use language which doesn't appeal to them? So that gives you a bit of an understanding of the consulting and the advisory side of it, and this really forms the backbone of everything we do. We always look at it from this point of view. A little bit more about our credentials, just so that you can see we are credible, and we do have some inkling of what we're doing after, 20 years we should do. So the first thing is we're 100% South African owned, as I said, established in 2000. We have a 4C Engaged leadership communication program, which has been attended by 1,500 delegates, blue chips, Engine, Nedbank, Mondi, and this is our product called 4C Engage. It's a leadership communication program, because your leadership are one of your primary channels of communication, and are they able to do what you're wanting to do in an efficient and in a manner whereby the message is not diluted. Then we have about 150 clients, not all active at the same time, and I would suggest you go and have a look at our website on our portfolio of work. We're always uploading our latest clients, and you'll get an idea of the type of work we've done for them, so you will also understand if there's anything that we can do for you, what it would be. We've done about 320 change management programs, and that's really taking who we are, converting it into what we do, getting your people on board, building that bridge so that they can deliver that, because at the end of the day, they are the people who deliver that. We've done about a rough estimate of about 151 internal communication strategies that we've developed for a number of our clients. And when I say that they're internal communication strategies, they're not just a strategy for the entire organization. There might be a strategy for one part of it. So what is my internal communication strategy going to be about? Well-being. What is my internal communication strategy going to be about? The strategy. So there's a difference between a communication strategy and communicating the strategy. So we've done both. And that really gives you some inkling there. And then we are an exclusive net presenter reseller, but besides that, we are also heavily into digital communication. So we understand that you need a digital platform, and that most things run from a digital platform. We understand social media, and we always integrate those into your communication strategies and make sure that you have the knowledge to implement those through a change management program as well. Because without those, again, how do you reach your audiences that you're wanting to speak to. So that gives you a bit of an update about our credentials. And then lastly, the most important thing, and I'm not saying it's the most important because they're all important, but where the rubber hits the road is on the execution. So no matter how many plans we've got, no matter how much advice you have, no matter how many of the leaders understand how to communicate, if they don't have the tools, they don't have the tactics, they don't have the tangible assets to share with the people that they're communicating with, often communications fall flat. So here are some of the things that a lot of you will recognize. We do videos and photography. We do social media strategies and content communications. We do change management. We do stakeholder relationships and public speaking. And Matt was here last week taking you through how we can teach people how to public speak and be more effective at it. We enable your technology, so if you don't have a digital platform that can take out messaging to your audiences, we can help you with that. So things like HubSpot, etc. We have a system that we will implement there. And then obviously graphic design, because if you don't have something which is interesting and clear, there will be no recall. Without no recall of whatever your message is, there will be no impact. And obviously the impact is what you're after. Narrative and content. In actual fact, today we're going to be talking a bit about narrative, which is interesting, and then branding of and creating various assets for you so that you have got those in your arsenal to take to market. So that gives you an overall of a picture of Talk to Us and what we do and how we fit into the marketplace. Just before we continue further, I would like to just get you on board with a quick poll, and the quick poll really helps us to understand a bit about where this is all going and how people are experiencing the lockdown, and we'll produce a report at the end of this just to give people insight into what is happening. So what we really want to understand right now is how would you define your emotions with regards to the pandemic? And I think it's quite interesting because people often limit their emotions to angry, sad, frustrated, but there are so many more emotions. So if you can maybe have a look and complete this quick poll, we would be very happy so that we can use the information at the end. We'll share the results with you. So I'm going to give you a short while to quickly input your emotions regards the pandemic and how you feel about it. Thanks very much. All right, so for those of you who have completed the poll, thanks a lot, and we'll get some feedback at the end of that. So I would just like to give you some context as to how we usually do these webinars, because then they're much easier to understand. We have a topic, we'll provide you with some context and some thought processes around the topic so that you don't have anything coming left of field at you. And then we give you sort of like 4 key areas that you can focus on that will help you in understanding the topic at hand. We then, at the end of the webinar, we can give you a recording of this. We send you a recording of the webinar, so if there's something you couldn't remember or you want to go and look at again, or if you want to share it with someone, the webinar is available to you on our website. And then the other thing that we also provide you with is at the end of every one, at the end of every webinar, there's a self-help workbook. And this workbook is quite an extensive one. It's got a number of pages. It is, I'll tell you now, it's about 52 pages long. And it's really interesting because often negative attitudes are always perceived to be someone else's. I think everybody understands the concept of I'm 10, but you're 5. That's how people see the world, and we've been taught to do that from when we were little. And that's something that everybody can work at. But what we're doing here is we have a look at your own attitude. So one of the topics is adjusting your own attitude. Then it's how you would handle negative situations. Then how you would deal with negative people. There's a difference between optimism and pessimism, and how do you evaluate them, and how do you balance them? Because you have to sometimes be optimistic, and sometimes you have to be pessimistic, because it's a safety mechanism inbred into humans to be pessimistic in some instances, and you have to use that as well. Then coping with negativity around change and challenging negative organizational norms. Some organizations have an overarching negative microenvironment, and this booklet gives you a lot of self-help exercises to do and questions to raise. So it's really good in doing some introspection. So holding the mirror up to yourself and having a look at who you are and how you deal with things will go a long way in understanding how you deal with negative situations. And if you were at last week's workshop, you will remember that we spoke about understanding yourself first, not Linda the mom or Linda the CEO or, believe it or not, Linda the gardener, but who Linda is and how I deal with things. And this is one of those activities that help me and help others to think about, how do I deal with negative situations, and possibly the way in which I deal with it makes others negative or makes others react more negatively. So bearing in mind now, we're going to go through the context, and then we've got the 4 focal areas that we're going to take you through. And today I can't cover all this content, but we're going to have some fun because I'm going to take you through how to deal with negative people, because it is interesting that, and I've got some nice examples. So the first thing really is, the old way of thinking and doing is people always, when you come up with something and you feel negative, they just say, oh, just get over yourself. That is the type of response that you will get in most instances. New way of thinking is for you to think, okay, so how do I get over myself when I'm in a complete funk? What do I do to get over my funk that I'm in? And so there are some things that we will talk within the context. Not going to spend too much time on yourself. I think there's a lot of information in the workbook that can take you through that. But I think take yourself through the workbook, and then we'll have some fun just understanding others, because that always helps. So who are the ones that we're going to understand? We're going to understand a bit more about the whiners. We're going to understand a bit more about the blamers. We're going to understand a bit more about the complainers, and a bit more about the defenders. And if we understand them and we understand how we're going to react, we'll have a lot more confidence when we go into situations that we're dreading, or we are approached by people of any of these ilk. We'll know how to deal with it, and as a result, we'll feel a lot better. So let's just have a look at the context around which we're talking today. Every person has a narrative. They have their own personal narrative that's going on in their head about who they are and how they behave towards things. And I think it's important that people understand that their narrative is not fixed. New studies show that our brains are actually malleable, and it's called neuroplasticity. The more we say certain things to our brains, the more they believe it, and the more we change the way in which we react based on that. So, you often say to children, they're naughty, they're bad. Be careful, because they will eventually believe they're naughty, they're bad, and that will be their claim to fame. So, I think one should always investigate your own narrative and what's going on in your own narrative and how that is affecting your thinking, because that narrative in your head is quite important as to how you see the rest of the world and how you deal with negativity. So, here's an example. If your perception about someone is that they're very quiet today, they seem to be angry with you, or they're upset with you, that's your first point of entry. You come in and you think this person is very quiet today, not because maybe he had a fight with his child at home, because maybe he's having a bad day. You immediately pull it towards you. You think he's angry with me, that's why he's quiet and he doesn't want to speak to you. It might have absolutely nothing to do with you. Then you have something called self-talk that's going on in your head. And the self-talk says, you've never really been sure about this colleague. You are a nephew of your employer, and you think he's always had some kind of issue with you because you had got the job through nepotism or because of favoritism or whatever. So in your mind, this person, and this is the narrative and the self-talk you're always feeding yourself, is that you're not sure how you fit in with this person, but you don't think he likes you. So given now that the person seems, oops, sorry, I went one too far, well, quite a few too far actually. Given now that the person thinks that you think that the person doesn't like you, and he's quite quiet and he's not speaking to you, the self-talk that's going on in your head is that he's angry with me, and so therefore your reaction could be a couple of things. Your reaction usually results in you not being yourself and overreacting in some way. You either think, well, you know, if he's going to talk to me in a way that I don't enjoy and he's going to be aggressive, boy, am I going to let him have it. There's going to be trouble. And immediately your reaction becomes visible in the way in which you deal with him and in your body language, all right? And then that adds into the whole perception, and the poor guy just got to work, he wasn't feeling great today. And this is how you've landed up where you are, where you're going to let him have it now, okay? So it's really important that you understand this process and you get into a situation with another individual where you engage with another individual and your mind is open. So say now he is not in a good mood and he's had a tough day and he says a couple of things that are not abnormally harsh or are not something he would say to only you, he would say to anybody. You now immediately reinforce that belief. Absolutely, look what he's just said. He doesn't like me. My self-talk has told me that. My narrative says that I'm an employee. I'm the nephew of the boss, so he doesn't like me. So that becomes your belief, and that then drives your narrative even further. So it's just a vicious circle. And I think it's something that if we're aware of, we can do something about it. If we're not aware of this process, we'll never get to do something about it. So, and it all starts with your reaction towards another. So an interesting thing that happened to me this morning, my daughter came into the room and she was all upset with me and she raised her tone and she was angry about an issue, and I immediately raised my tone. She said, "Why are you shouting at me?" So I said, "I'm reacting to the way in which you've dealt with me. I'm mirroring your level of frustration. Perhaps the way in which you approach me will be different. You know, if you understand this, and I will approach you differently." And I think that's something that we just need to take into account. So the next thing I just want to go a bit about is this, your narrative, because organizations have narratives as well, and they're also reinforced by the same things. So let's just talk about your personal narrative and what is narrative and lexicon. So the narrative is the story that's going on in your head, and the lexicon is the words that you're using to reinforce that story. So let's just explain a bit about narrative theory. When we tell each other stories, we have certain fixed points. So if I wanted to explain to somebody to go and have a look at the night star, or a nice star in the sky, well, which one am I talking about? That's like a bit difficult. So we label things, and that labeling is our lexicon. So we say, go and have a look at the southern sky. And okay, so now you know you've got to have a look at the southern sky. And then we've labeled areas in the sky. So we say, go and have a look at Orion's belt, or go and have a look at Sagittarius. And to the left of that, you'll see a star that looks like this. Okay, so it's a direction that we steer people in with our lexicon. Now, lexicon is often words that are trigger words, or they frame certain experiences that we've had. And so lexicon is important. I don't want to cover too much about that today, but these words are the words that we've used to label things. So we've seen so many instances, and I'll give you a good example of it. We launched a program at a company about 10, 15 years ago, and everybody thought it was a fantastic idea, and it was about you had a passport to the company. It was very badly received by a number of the lower level black people in the organization, because they associated that with a pass and not with traveling because they haven't had that experience. Most people, including the more wealthy people, they associated it with something which was really exciting. It was a passport, I'm traveling, that's so great. But a lot of the black organizational people who haven't had that experience and who were suppressed under apartheid and had to carry their past, for them it was just a no-no. So that lexicon is so important, and it's a trigger word. You need to think about a lot of the trigger words in your life so that you know best when somebody says that and don't overreact to it, because it might not be a trigger word for them. So given now that we have an understanding of the story, and your story will have lots of things in it. It will have when you were born, where you went to school, what sport you liked, what things happened to you, and how those things through your life have formed who you are today. Those things are all reinforced by voices of authority and take it for granted beliefs and ideas. What does that mean? Voices of authority. A teacher who you loved and adored told you would never amount to anything. Absolutely believe that. And that has influenced your narrative. So every time your story gets to a point where you think, yes, now I've made it, I've come there, and a little voice in the back of your head says, no, you haven't, you're never going to amount to anything. So, and those voices of authority only belong to people who mean something in your life. If they don't mean something in your life, it really doesn't bother you. So think of the voices of authority in your life, but also think, who are you an authority to in your life? And how does what you say to them make a difference and create a negative vibe from them? And then they're taken for granted beliefs and ideas. And those would be things like, South Africa is going nowhere. Our government is so corrupt. Children should be seen and not heard. And this is what we call the macro environment, or the water we're swimming in. Assuming we're fish, these are all the things that we're swimming in. Okay, we're swimming in these things all the time. We've got our own narrative and our own lexicon, and there's a whole lot of things going on. So it's really difficult to navigate this. The greater the understanding you have of it, the more able you are to understand it. A lot of these narratives go one of two ways. They either take you towards scarcity. In other words, I'm really not good at anything. I'm not going to pass this year. And if I don't pass, then I will never get into varsity. If I don't get into varsity, I'm going to be on the side of the street begging for money. And it just dwindles down and down and down. And it hurts you, doesn't help you. Or you have voices of authority that take you towards abundance. I achieved this one thing and I did really well. Now that should give me the understanding and the confidence to tackle the next thing. And then that takes you to the next thing and you think, well, geez, look how clever I am and what I achieved there. Now I'm sure I can tackle this and I'll achieve this as well. And that takes you towards abundance and you spiral up. So you either spiral down or you spiral up based on the narrative that's going on in your head. So understanding this now, you can see how those perceptions we have, the self-talk we have, how we react to it, all hang together around the central theme of your narrative. All right, so now let's go into a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve when you have conversations with others and what you're trying to do when you become more self-aware. So self-awareness is really about understanding your own reaction. So people often talk about you can't change what's going to happen to you, but you can change how you're going to react to it. And I think that's important. If you understand yourself a whole lot better, you understand your own narrative, you understand all these trigger words that you have, you'll understand how you're going to react to things. And as a result, you'll be able to manage yourself better and you'll be able to manage the way in which you deal with certain instances a lot better. So let's have a look at the first thing. You're in a situation and first thing you have to look at, and look, these things are not impossible. They happen in a split second. And most of us deal with them well. It's the frontal part of our brain, which is called the executive part of our brain, which manages this, and it works in milliseconds. So don't think, oh, I'll never think of all these things. Of course you will. So the situation you're in, what is going on inside your head? Where do I find myself? You go into a meeting and I'm not sure where I stand with this person. I'm not happy today myself. etc., etc. So you have an understanding of what's going on inside your head, and those are your own perceptions, your narrative, etc. How are you yourself explain? How are you, and how are you explaining the situation to yourself? So I'm not in a good space, and I look at this situation and I explain it to myself in the following light. This person is angry with me. Okay, when did I check that? Did I check that? Did I ask him? You don't seem yourself today. Do you want to talk about it, or should we continue with the meeting? Would you rather cancel it? You don't do that, so you just keep that assumption. So how do you explain the situation to yourself, and what is known? What are the facts that you are aware of right now? So another little tip, find a book by Katie Byron. It's called Loving What Is, and she explains the situation so beautifully about relationships in marriage and relationships with children and with in-laws. And it's really about get the facts, trust the facts, and operate around the facts and not around your own emotions, because boy, oh boy, can they betray you sometimes. So it's really understanding what's going on in your head when a situation arises, especially a negative situation. The next thing is to confront your own feelings. So you've now understood the situation, you react to it, and you feel what? What do you feel? Do you feel angry? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel disappointed, ignored, overwhelmed, aggressive? There are so many feelings. Try to unravel what you're feeling before you actually react. Because it depends on what your own feeling is, you will react to that feeling. And what is that? You'll either avoid, and you might miss out on something good. You'll scream and shout, and somebody will think, okay, I don't ever want to see that person again. Or it might even result in violence. So I think these three things: understand your situation from a logical point of view, confront your feelings, make sure you understand them. Disappointment and anger are very, very close. And then how do you react? And lastly, but not least, is what are you going to get out of this? Did you get the outcome you wanted? So you might go into a meeting thinking, I would like to, or you might have a conversation with a person, I would like to. Did you get the outcome you wanted? Because if you didn't, your self-esteem will be damaged. If you did, your self-esteem will improve. And there's a good saying that, again, I do manage to find people that just resonate with me, and they have such wonderful sayings. And this is my clinical psychologist, and her name's Brenda Lazarson, and she always talks about, you know what your best self is, you know how you want people to perceive you, you know how you would like people to think about you. Was that aligned to your best self? And if it wasn't, it's not the end of the world. Recover. Try next time to be better. Okay, so what is your best self? Define your best self. How would you like people to see you? Most parents have this. They would like their kids to see them in a certain way. And sometimes you let yourself down so badly because children drive you absolutely insane. And then after that you think, oh, but I think it's never to give up. It's to say my best self is in there. I'm going to find it, and I'm going to hone in on it, and eventually I'll get it right every single time with coconut. So that gives you some context about what we're talking about negative attitudes, your own attitudes towards negativity, and how you deal with that around the self-awareness side. Now, this is the part where we're going to have some fun, and we're going to look at others. They're always fun to look at. It's like sitting in the shopping center. You might be scurrying around doing your shopping in your PJs. Well, not quite. But it's always interesting to sit and watch the others walk past. So this is the same thing that we're going to do now. So let's just have a look. I'm just going to get you our people, our whiners, blamers, complainers, and defenders. And the first one that we're going to go into is the whiner. How do you identify a whiner? Oh, sorry. No, we're not going to go into the whiners. Give me 1 second. I've lost my place again. Hold on 1 minute. I'm becoming world famous at this. Sorry about that. All right, let's have a look at the whiners. Some of you might recognize him. Some of you may not. This is, so when I was putting together this material, I thought to myself, who is the epitome of a whiner? and it just had to be Nigel Farage. They're chronically pessimistic. They take everything personally. They're full of hopelessness and despair, and they're helpless and gloomy. So their words are always their sentence construction, their narrative that's going on in their head, and their lexicon is things will never change. Nobody cares about me or us. Everyone takes advantage of me or us if they're trying to gather people to come their way. And this isn't fair, but we all know that life is not fair. So how do you deal with those people? I think to a large extent you have to, in all of these situations, you have to acknowledge that they are in their own bubble, they may not have sorted themselves out, and how invested are you in trying to help them change at the expense of yourself? So if it's somebody that you're very close to, you might actually say to them, you're being a real one, and now this is what this means, maybe not. But if not, and in most work situations that's not the case, the thing that they're trying to do, the motivation for them doing this, is they want sympathy. They're trying to drag you in, and then they want you to take over the problem and for you to manage it and to be the person who holds the purse strings, or not the purse strings, the strings of their situation and manages it, and they will sit back. Okay? So you often have to say to yourself, okay, how do I deal with it? Indicate concern. So what were some of the things that you're saying? Must be difficult for you in the situation you're in. How are you handling this situation? Are you coming to grips with it? And then good at saying, you need to get good at saying, that's too bad, and it's such a pity, but then learn to walk away. So for them, it's too bad, it's such a pity, I understand you, walk away. That's the way in which you handle with wine. You handle negative conversations with whiners. So let's go to the complainers. I guess you're all wanting to know who the complainer is. I just love this picture because that's exactly how I feel when I bump into a complainer. So what is a complainer always on about? They're constantly downtrodden. They find fault with everybody and everything except themselves. They criticize every new idea and strategy, and they engage in negative comparisons. So what would their lexicon and their narrative be? It's just one thing after another. I can't cope, it will never end. I'm paralyzed, I can't move because of all of these things. Nobody here really knows what's going on. It's all, nobody is in control of anything. It's all just a mess. I can't do this. That will never work. We've tried that before. I don't know how many business meetings I've sat in where we've decided to do an initiative and people will say that won't work. We tried that before in the year 1920 and it didn't work then. The fact that everything's changed then, well, that's by the by. And then the favorite old one, at my old jobs, they never. Okay, so this is a complainer. So what is their motivation? Their motivation is they want to get attention, and they want you to manage their expectations from the point of view of saying, well, did you think about what your expectation was? Has this met your expectation? And go through the checklist of has it or hasn't it, and make them feel better about their situation. Again, how much time do you want to invest in that? Because that's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. So what do you have to do here? You have to get good at saying, you know what, I'm sure you'll sort this out. I have every confidence that you've got this, okay? And again, same remedy, walk away. You've got this, you'll manage it. You've managed it before, you've been there before. So same remedy, walk away. Then we've got the next lot, which are also an interesting bunch, and I've done it again. Sorry, folks, I'll find myself. On a roll today, being butterfingers. Then we've got the complainers. And we've done the complainers. I think I missed out one earlier, actually, but it's not necessary to go in a certain order. We've got the blamers, and they're also an interesting bunch, and we gave that a bit away. I'm sure you all understand who this person is. And who's a blamer? And what do? They transfer blame. Look at the mess you've gotten us into. They blame others for outcomes. I'd better do it myself if I want it done properly. So they want to take ownership of everything. They won't accept responsibility. I'm not taking this lying down. It's not my problem. I'm going to go and find the person who's involved and I'm going to tell them to sort it out. And they always feel the need to get even. I won't forget this. And I think that's also a scary thing. So what is their motivation? Their motivation is just to avoid responsibility. You know, it was his fault or her fault. They just want to avoid responsibility in all cases. Try and understand what they're upset about. Do some perception checking of your own and use a lot of I statements. I'm glad you told me how you feel. This makes me feel whatever. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. But the one thing here that's quite important is when they threaten you, take it seriously. And this is not a walk away, this is a run away. Okay, so I think that's important. Take their threats seriously. See if I can sort my butterfingers out now. There we go. And then lastly are the defenders. And I just cannot help it. But this man is a perfect example of everything that one shouldn't do in a negative environment, or what negative is about. So I just want to show you this quick clip.
I didn't start it.
Okay,
I didn't start it.
But sir, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old.
I didn't start it. I didn't start it.
Okay,
I didn't start it.
But sir, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old.
I didn't start it.
So have you ever heard of that? I didn't start it, you know. I always say to my kids, yes, well, I'm going to end it, even if you didn't start it. But it's quite interesting. But here, what are they trying to achieve? What is their motivation? Their motivation is, the devil made me do it. Their motivation is self-preservation at all costs. Okay, and the things they say are, it wasn't my fault, as you've heard. They perceive many situations as threatening. Nobody ever tells me anything. I'm always the last to know. I'm the most important, but I'm the last to know. And therefore, I can't take responsibility for this because I was the last to know. Subtle spreads negativity. That doesn't make sense. Oh, subtly they spread negativity. Okay, that's not my job. So they try to sort of like say, I can't take responsibility because it's not my job. And they don't always do that in a direct way. They do that in a subtle way. They fear exposure of personal shortcomings. I have to do everything myself. However, in a lot of instances, when they do it themselves, it still fails, and then they'll find someone to blame no matter what the situation. So what do you do in a situation with that? You know, so there you need to stick to behaviors, and you need to do a similar thing where you say, you know, I've always admired what you do in this circumstance, because that's what they want to hear, you know, and also you build on the fact that they are responsible by saying, you know, you achieved this and you got this right. And again here, I think you must always be careful because there will be backlash and there will be malice if something doesn't work. So the key here is to run away, but run away backwards so that you don't turn your back, because you could be in trouble if you did turn your back. So that's a bit about the others. Have a look at those. And I think the scary thing here is I often look at these and I think, am I one of those? Am I a complainer? Am I a defender? So I think you need to just also be aware from a self-awareness point of view. Are you sometimes some of these? And if you are, catch yourself doing it and reverse. And that's key, okay? Try to always get to the fact. What is the fact? How do I need to deal with this? How am I going to come out of it being my best self and making sure that the outcome of this conversation, of this negative situation, is not entirely negative. There's some positivity in it. So the quick poll here, if you can just answer, there's 1 or 2 questions in there, and it's really about what we've spoken about on the 4 focal areas. So if you wouldn't mind just answering that poll, I'll give you a minute or so. and then we'll just wrap up and we'll give you some nice, interesting news at the end of that. So please go ahead. Great. Thanks, everybody. So now just the last little kind of wrap up here. If you remember, last week we said when the curtain goes up and the conversation starts and everything happens, if we can understand ourselves and understand how we're going to deal with situations, and we know how to deal with certain negative issues, it'll be smooth sailing and we'll have a fair amount of personal confidence. Charles, I don't know whether your poll results are in, and if they are, do you want to share those with us?
If you can just give me a second, and I'll give it to you in a moment.
It's fine.
Carry on with the other announcement.
So one of the things that we've realized over the last while is there's a lot of people who want to belong to the webinars, but they don't necessarily sign up in time. We have about 70 people who follow us, and we want to broaden that because we feel that the webinars are helping people and are helping people make decisions about certain things, not only in their lives, but within the organizations they work in. So we are starting a streaming channel, and we are creating more channels within that, or more topics within the channels. So it will be called Streaming Talk to Us, and within that we will have a number of slots where we'll be talking about Backstage for Business, we'll be talking about self-help guides, we'll be talking about communication for your business and how do you sort out your communication. We'll be talking about setting up your own streaming facilities and your own webinar facilities, and they'll all be falling into different slots and times. So Charles will send you information in that regard, and as a result you'll be able to follow certain of them, and they'll be streamed on all the main channels. So they'll be live streamed on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, on YouTube, and Instagram. I think those are the 5. They'll be live and they'll be fed on that, and you'll be able to pick up the times. And if you go into Facebook and you click on let me know when there's a live event, you'll be able to go and belong to the live event, and we'll have a timetable of events which will stretch through the day, and we'll also be doing one afternoon or late afternoon or evening slot, because there are a lot of people who are saying they'd like to be able to see this, and they can only see it in the evening. These webinars will continue, but they'll just be live streamed. So the new normal is not going to go away. It's still going to be there. It'll still be the same time slot, but now it'll be live streamed on all the channels, and you will immediately be able to replay the actual recording. You won't have to wait for Charles to send you the information, and you'll be able to go and pick up the books yourself on the website. I'm sure Charles might want to add to that once we get around to just going through that. But in the meantime, Charles, how are we doing on the results?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm ready to share it now. Let me just share my screen quickly.
Cool. Yes.
Okay,
So
thanks everybody. So here's a quick poll number 1, the results. The question was, how would you define your emotions with regards to the pandemic? The options were overwhelmed, hostile, angry, negative, no worries, anxious, sad, and out of control. No one feels out of control, which is a wonderful thing, I would say. But I think the majority of emotion being felt is a feeling of being totally overwhelmed, closely followed by hostile and angry and anxious. So that was the feedback from poll number 1. And then if we go to poll number 2, in the current situation, do you recognize any of the negative attitudes explained? Most people can recognize all of them. No one couldn't identify with any one of them, so that was good. And will the tips provided today help you? The 100% response rate to that was yes. So thanks for that, everybody. Really do appreciate your participation, and I'll hand back to Linda.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I think I can identify with that overwhelmed feeling. I think we all are feeling overwhelmed. I agree with that 100%. I just want to get back to sharing my screen. Hopefully we're back to smooth sailing. So if we as individuals get this right what would success look like? And in organizations as well, if everybody knew how to deal with negative attitudes and had a script to work from, I think the working environment would be a lot better. And I think when I say the working environment, I'm not just meaning when we're in an office, because I don't know if that's going to be the same moving forward. But I think it's just when we get into situations or we're in team meetings and we're all online, I think it'll help the working environment if we all know how to deal with negative attitudes. Taking ownership of their own actions. If people understood what is going on and that everybody took ownership of their own actions and they realized, oh, I'm being a blamer. What is it? Is it my narrative? Have I got the wrong perception? Maybe I should just ask someone how they're feeling. If they applied those principles, I think it would be a lot better, because everybody would have ownership of their own actions and be able to work things out and have a far more meaningful conversation. We'll also be able to hold each other accountable. So if we understand what is going on with someone else and we can look at it and we can say how we're feeling, we can hold each other accountable. And then this always improves productivity with purpose. So again, this is something that we're doing because we're trying to create a more meaningful working environment, working experience, engagement experience. And a lot of these skills that we're talking about today, and in a lot of the workshops that we have, are not skills that are only related to your work environment. They're skills that you can take with you throughout your life, whether they're with your children, whether they're with your mother-in-law or your parents or a good friend. They are skills that you can use anywhere in life, and that is really very useful. So the theory is to talk so that people will listen, but listen so that people will talk, and that's the concept. So once again, thanks for the session. And then I think our next session is be what you want to see and have messages that have meaning. So again, this is something which is not only for you as an individual, but it can also work in your organization. And then last but not least is just some of the stuff I spoke to you about us streaming live. So it's live streaming for Talk to Us. And yes, it was Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I think we had Twitch as well. Maybe that one's fallen off. Charles, do you want to add something to this facility that we're going to be launching?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. So basically what we are going to be doing, although we've been broadcasting the webinar series live to date via the Teams, Microsoft Teams platform, we're wanting to broaden the participation opportunities for our audience. We've had a lot of people signing up and getting involved and attending the sessions, but we're wanting to make it more readily accessible on other platforms as well that people might appreciate using. So that is why we've decided that we're going to be broadcasting these live webinar sessions on all streaming platforms that you're familiar with. So you would be able to catch this live stream on Facebook or on Twitter or in YouTube or Instagram. LinkedIn is not quite ready yet. You've got to go through an application process with all of these, and our application approval hasn't been received from LinkedIn yet. But the plan is to broadcast on that as well. So it'll be the exact same broadcast that will take place at the same time live on all of those platforms. And we just hope to be able to make these learning opportunities that much more accessible and available to a larger audience that might want to participate in it. So I think that kind of like gives a nice overall explanation on it. Linda, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
No, I just want to thank everybody for attending the webinar. Please tell anybody that you may know that might be interested in it to join us. If you want to send us an email so that we can make sure they get our communication. When you see all the information come out on Facebook and LinkedIn and all the various channels, please like it. Please send us any comments or questions that you may have, seeing as how this will be a lot more accessible now. And my apologies for having butterfingers, but I think maybe it's just because I wanted to show them off. I went for a manicure, which was just divine. It's the first time in 4 months. So maybe that's why they still don't feel like my own fingers anymore. So thank you everybody one more time, and it was really great having you, and thanks for your response to the polls, and we'll see you next week, if not sooner. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.